This is Tamoor Hussain reading for reviewer Jordan Ramey. Assassin's Creed Valhalla embraces its series heritage and makes for a far more rewarding experience for longtime fans as a result, though newcomers can still enjoy Valhalla's combat and emphasis on exploration. The game's biggest narrative ramifications are largely deep cuts in reference to previous Assassin's Creed titles, but the looping structure of the overall narrative means you can still follow and enjoy Valhalla's story without years of time spent in the Animus. In Valhalla, you once again play as Layla Hassan, who's facing the daunting task of needing to save the world, and some bones are her only clue on how to do so. With no other leads, Layla hops into the Animus with a DNA sample taken from the remains, allowing her to relive the person's life. This time, she'll be Eivor, a Viking who lived during the 9th century. Valhalla's modern day plot is the most focused that this aspect of the franchise has been in years. There's a clear and present danger, and a nice setup for the through line of the game's campaign, the concept of fate. However, the same care is not extended to Layla, whose arc in this game concludes in a way that doesn't feel earned. For a game all about fate and the consequences of trying to break free of it, Layla ends up feeling like a passenger more than a driver of her story. Thankfully, Eivor more than picks up the slack with their story. At the start of Valhalla, Eivor has a vision that foretells they will meet a terrible fate. Before they can make proper sense of the more minute details of the vision, however, their adopted brother Sigurd decides to leave Norway for England, prompting them to follow. The two re-establish themselves, but find their new home is now located at the centerpiece of several wars. Sigurd sets out to rule over or ally with each of England's 4 kings in order to carve out a safe plot of land for their clan, leaving Eivor behind to oversee their growing settlement. Valhalla's story plays out over a series of self-contained narrative arcs. By talking to Sigurd's wife, Randvi, Eivor can choose which alliances to pursue next, which kicks off a 2 to 3 hour story. Upon completion, Eivor returns to Randvi and reports on what transpired, invests any collected resources into the settlement, and then picks the next narrative thread. Once an arc is done, it's done. Certain characters can come back in later arcs, but that is very rare. To the game's benefit, this means that if a specific narrative arc has characters or gameplay that you don't necessarily enjoy, you know that once the arc is over, you're likely never going to have to engage with that pocket of England ever again. The story will soon move past that arc, and then largely act like it never existed, giving you new characters to meet and mission structures to engage with. However, this works against the game too, as anything you like won't last either. The biggest detriment of the self-contained arcs is the somewhat shallow supporting cast. Because characters typically only stick around for a few hours, there isn't much time for development, and where there is any, it's rushed. Romances especially suffer for this. They're shallow and don't have any meaningful impact on Eivor's story. Eivor is the one that bucks the trend of paper-thin characters in Valhalla. Though their actual character is already established, you get to push and prod at their thoughts and actions. Eivor wants to avoid their fate, and you get to influence how far they're willing to go to ensure that outcome.
Do we have any allies to speak of, or is that your excuse to do nothing?
The decisions you make determine how others view Eivor, which can result in slight alterations to how certain arcs and the campaign as a whole end. They're small changes that avoid outright redefining the timeline of real human history, instead focusing on giving you the room to somewhat shape Eivor into your desired protagonist. Eivor's lasting impact, or the potential for it, is also an effective driving force to carry players through to the end. Figuring out how a random Viking from the 800s will save the world in 2020 is an intriguing proposition, especially since Valhalla does a good job of laying breadcrumbs of knowledge and small revelations throughout its runtime to keep you chasing the answer to that question. Overall, this storytelling structure works out for Valhalla. Its pacing isn't without its issues. The opening hours are a slog to get through, for example, but once it hits its stride with memorable arcs and more things to do in the settlement, Valhalla starts to exhibit the kind of confidence you'd expect in the third go at an open world RPG style of Assassin's Creed. It just takes some time to get to that point. Valhalla trusts you to think like an explorer, to put yourself in Eivor's shoes as they navigate and attempt to understand England. This is still a Ubisoft game that's packed with waypoints to follow for the main campaign and side missions, but in Valhalla they're also designed to encourage you towards discovery, and the game has such wonderful, heartbreaking, hilarious and intriguing things to look for off the beaten path.
Excuse me, I have a slight pain. Do you notice anything on my head?
In its combat, you'll find the most agency in how you shape Eivor. Earning skill points allows you to invest in the constellation-like skill tree. The constellation of lines twist and turn on one another, allowing you to easily double back invest in more than one tree, while also having different branches of each tree cross over for more interesting build opportunities. You can respec Eivor's skills at any time for free, allowing you to easily reshape them if one combat style isn't to your liking. Regardless of where you put your skill points, Eivor is a badass raider who dual wields weapons with a frenzied intensity. Valhalla encourages you to fight aggressively. Eivor doesn't regenerate health and your healing rations are limited, so it's in your best interest to end fights as quickly as possible by assassinating an opponent or disrupting the tempo of their attacks with powerful strikes, counters or blocks. Button mashing will deliver you to an early grave. Strategically playing to your strengths is the only way to succeed against tougher foes. Abilities are where Valhalla's combat gets exciting. You can equip 8 at one time, allowing you to further define your ideal build for Eivor. Through both skills and abilities, and the way the game gives you the adrenaline needed to execute them, you're encouraged to begin fights with a quick, decisive strike, and then aggressively keep up the pressure to win. Valhalla also sees you fight your enemy with social stealth. This is used to great effect in some of the more tense story arcs, where Eivor is hunting members of the Order of Ancients in cities that the group or an enemy king controls, forcing them to blend in and parkour across rooftops until they can close in on their target. However, the parkour mechanics aren't as good as those seen in some previous entries, so Eivor can feel a bit clunky when trying to stealth. It's frustrating when you accidentally die or get noticed because the controls are working against you. It occasionally feels like it would have been easier just to announce yourself and kill everyone in the vicinity instead. And if you want to do that, that's fine. Valhalla does not immediately fail you for being detected. Although the Assassin's Creed franchise will no doubt continue, there's a real sense of finality to Valhalla's main campaign. Valhalla brings together dozens of narrative threads, referencing nearly every mainline game in the franchise to tell you how they all connect. In this way, the game can feel specifically designed for longtime fans. However, Assassin's Creed Valhalla is more than capable of standing on its own. Eivor is a good hero, with an identity that drives the mystery behind the main narrative, and they shine in the self-contained arc structure of Valhalla's story. The supporting cast may not shine as brightly, but it's easy to forgive that when exploring England is so rewarding.